Hi, and welcome to this screencast. This screencast will be part of your assignment for your Blended Friday, Friday the 7th of November. This will be your first experience with a Blended Friday, so you have two separate assignments to complete. You first have to view this screencast and take good notes on it. And then, as I will outline in my email to you, there is a Google Doc that you will access with some instructions for an assignment that you will turn in on the website Collaborate Classroom, and I sent you an invitation to that website yesterday, Wednesday. So you hopefully have registered for that website. So basically what we are going to talk about in this screencast here is the rise of Sparta, and I have a short PowerPoint here. This will not be a very long screencast, but I just want to give you a few notes on Sparta here. You have done your Flipgrid video hopefully by now, so you have read a little bit about Sparta, but I also want you to have a few notes on Sparta, on the key aspects of Spartan society, because it is quite different from the Athenian society. So this is the rise of Sparta here. So pay good attention, take down the notes that are on the slides, and also take down anything, note anything that you find interesting that I say or that you might consider relevant. So here we go. So again, this is the rise of Sparta. So if we look at Sparta during the Lyric Age, in a similar fashion to Athens, Sparta was a polis that did not have enough land. And as you might remember, the Athenians came up with a solution to colonize. They sent people out, they gave them that 1 year supply. But the Spartans came up with a different solution here. Instead of sending out people to other areas, the Spartans basically conquered their neighbors. They were a relatively strong military state, and they just started to take over their neighboring poli that were located around them. Around 650, they took over the area of the city-state of Messina. And they turned the population of Messina into what the Spartans called helots. And helots were basically serfs or slaves. And the Spartans were not very nice to the helots or to the citizens of Messina after they had taken them over. So eventually the helots or the citizens of Messina revolted. The Spartans were able to defeat the revolt, but they kind of sat down after they had defeated this revolt and thought to themselves, this took a lot of effort. This took a lot of lives lost. A lot of our men died. We need to figure out something that works a little bit better. We need to have a stronger military so we can withstand all of these attacks, and so that we can conquer enough land to be able to support our population. So again, there's a drastically different approach from Athens. So if you look at the political system that the Spartans put together, and this starts around 600, they had two kings, which is kind of unusual. I don't think we've seen that so far in this course. And you might be able to guess why they had two kings. They figured that if we have two kings, if one of them is bad, or if one of them makes a bad decision, the other one will be able to say, "Hey, that's not a good idea. Let's do it this way, or let's come up with a different solution." You might also be able to realize that what this did, though, is that this is not a perfect scenario, because oftentimes these kings fought with one another and they could not agree on a set policy. So although in theory this idea might sound quite reasonable, in reality it did not work out all that well. They also had a council of 30. And in this council of 30, you had 28 elders, so the oldest and wisest men of the Spartan society, plus the two kings. So together, these 28 elders and the two kings came up with legislation. This was primarily driven by the kings. They came up with most of the ideas, but the elders had to agree to it as well. And then they presented this legislation to an assembly. This is obviously relatively similar to Athens, where the Council of 500 presented their legislation to the assembly, and then the assembly in Athens debated and voted on this legislation. The Spartans, again, are a little bit different. Their assembly, which also consisted of all free men, could only vote. They could not debate the matter, so they could either say yes to a piece of legislation or no to a piece of legislation. And in reality, what this means is that basically all of the legislation that the Council of 30 came up with basically passed. So the people really don't have a whole lot of power here in Sparta. Instead, the vast majority of the power is located with the 28 elders, and then especially with the 2 kings. They also had another layer of their government, and this was the institution of E4. They have 5 E4s, and these E4s were in charge of education and moral behavior. Moral behavior basically involves anything that has to do with the legal system, anything that has to do with how people behave, what they should and should not do. So as you can imagine, these E4s are actually quite powerful and quite important. So the E4s played a big role as well. So this is the political system in Sparta here. It's not by any stretch of the imagination a perfect system, but it's a pretty well functioning system that gets the job done most of the time. So if we then take a look at Spartan society here, the Spartan society was basically focused on one thing, and that was warfare. I cannot overstate how important warfare was to the Spartans. That was the most important thing in society. That's what everybody talked about all the time. That's what everybody trained for. That's what everybody focused on. That was the purpose for the Spartan society, was to be a good soldier and have a strong army. This started all the way when children were born. Each child that was born in Sparta had to undergo an examination by doctors. And if for some reason the infant was deemed to have some kind of weakness, if the infant, he or she, looked frail, or if the infant was not large enough, they would actually be killed. Because again, the Spartans thought that the people that they wanted in the society should be strong people, healthy people. So they wanted to get rid of anybody who was not strong and healthy. What they would do, and this is actually quite terrible, they would kill these infants in one of 2 ways. They would have this examination on top of a big mountain or a big hill, and they would do one or 2 things with the infants that they did not want to keep. They would either leave the infants there in a basket so that they could be eaten by wild animals, or they would throw the infants down the hill and kill them that way. So again, that gives you an idea of how harsh this society really was. If you were a boy in Sparta, you started your military training at 7. You would go a couple of times a week to military school, and you would learn the basics of what it meant to be a soldier. When you turned 12, you would go full-time into the army. You would leave your home, you would leave your family, and you would go and live with the other soldiers until you were 30. So for 18 years, all you did was fight, train to fight, focus on being a warrior. So this military training and fighting defined you. People that were respected in society were the greatest warriors. People that were not as respected were people that were not as strong on the battlefield, or during the military drills, or whatever it might be. After you had turned 30, you could go home. But you could still be called up in case of war. So if they had a war, they needed you to fight for Sparta, all the way up until 60, you could be called up and you would have to go to fight. One thing that you might wonder about is marriage. Most ancient societies married. In most ancient societies, people married very early. That was also the case in Sparta. So usually their marriages were arranged, and if you were a boy, you would probably marry sometime around 17 or 18 with a woman or a young girl that was probably somewhere in between 14 and 15. So if you're a young woman here, let's say of the age of 17, you just got married, you will not see your husband except for maybe once or twice a year for the next 15 or 16 years. So again, this is a very kind of different type of society here, entirely focused on warfare. So again, if we look at Spartan society and some characteristics that they value here, people should be tough, they should be brave, they should be frugal, they should be strong, they should be harsh, and that did not only go for the men. The same characteristics here were desired in women. As a matter of fact, the Spartans are the first people to encourage physical activity for women. In ancient societies, many times women were considered weak, and it was said that they should not exercise, they should not work too hard, but the Spartans prided themselves on how strong their women were. And as a result of this, the role of women in Sparta is very, very powerful. The women in Sparta have more power than in just about any other ancient society. And this is because of two reasons. For one, because of the fact, again, going back to the example I mentioned a minute ago, if you were 17 or 18, you married somebody of the same age, you would not see your husband for the next 13, 14, 15 years. So during that time, you would have to take care of the farm that your parents or the parents of your husband gave to you. You would have to do all the work. You'd have to do every single thing because all that your husband did was to be out fighting. So because of this, women were very, very well respected. They had a very, very high status in Spartan society, which again is very, very unusual for these ancient societies. So the dynamic between men and women were completely different in Sparta compared to the rest of Greece or compared to the rest of society, ancient societies or the ancient world as well. So that is basically it. Those are some of the few notes that I wanted you to have on Sparta, give you a kind of a basic idea along with the reading that you did on Sparta for your homework for Friday. The next step in this Blended Friday is that you should now access the Google Doc that I sent to you in your email. You should consider that assignment where you have to write a real estate advertisement. That is, you're advertising a house to be sold in either Sparta or Athens, and you have to kind of think of some of the benefits and advantages and maybe disadvantages that come with living in either Athens or Sparta. Again, you only have to pick one, either Athens or Sparta, and again, these instructions are outlined in the Google Doc. I hope that you have a good Friday, and I wish you all a great weekend, and I'll see you Monday.